Hey everyone, Robert here, author of Expansion Mastery, the practical guide to living a fully engaged life. Are you ready to start living your life to the fullest? Are you ready and willing to transform yourself and your life from ordinary to extraordinary? Welcome, my friends, to the Fully Engaged Life. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving celebration. Did you remember to keep your vibration high and to unplug from all of the sources of negativity? I sure hope so. I know you enjoyed your holiday if you did that. Beginning with this episode, I'm going to create a brief series on clarity. What I want to do is bring some clarity to various spiritual aspects and terms that are very common. And I've covered a lot of this material, but what I want to do is just break it down and make it very palatable. And that was one of the strong features in my book, Expansion Mastery, was how I broke everything down and made it so practical instead of something obscure and mystical and outright confusing. For today's episode, I would like to begin with awakening and what awakening really means. We hear the term all the time, but do we truly grasp the meaning behind it? Well, there are many really great definitions used by various spiritual masters and authors. What I'm going to attempt to do for you is to put it into a very practical sense. Something that can maybe help give you a solid core definition for something that is very difficult to even be put into words. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is get what it is not out of the way, because there are all kinds of new silly definitions and ideas for what awakening is according to New Age spirituality. And the biggest thing we have to understand is how the term awakening is being twisted right now into the term being woke. Being woke is absolutely not being awakened. It is the absolute opposite of that. And I know many of you have heard me say that before, but I think it bears repeating. So let's get into what it is. Awakening is basically a term used to describe a state of being that is beyond the mind and one that allows us to be reconnected to our conscious awareness. Whether you want to call it awakening, enlightenment, or whatever, it's all basically the same thing. Awakening is just a very good descriptive term, not to mention just how incredibly fitting it is. We have to come to the realization of what it is to awaken. And the only way we can do that is through our own experience with the practices of mindfulness, meditative practices, and meditation. This is the way to truly have the understanding of awakening, is by experiencing it. However, I'll try and offer some framework for that here. Most all of humanity sleepwalks their way through life, completely oblivious as to the fact that they are not really awake. They believe they are awake, but this is actually not the case. The vast majority of people go through every aspect of their life while asleep. Imagine choosing your spouse while you're asleep, deciding to have children while you're asleep, spending your entire life going through the motions on autopilot, fooled into believing that it's your normal state of being. That's just a little bit of what is meant by being asleep. In order for us to grasp what it is to awaken, it helps for us to understand what it is to be asleep. It's my aim by the end of this episode to make sure that you have clarity as to both of those states. I'm going to break this down into 4 different points of view, all of which are correct and as a whole encompass the idea of awakening. With the first one, I would like to address becoming aware of the external or worldly illusions, as well as our own internal mental delusions. As we awaken, we get in touch with, reconnected to our conscious awareness. And when we are aware, we have the ability to see through all of the worldly illusions, all of the things that are external, all these illusions that are created from marketing and politicians and religions and other people's agendas and everything else. We're able to see through those. We're able to see them for what they are. And it doesn't mean that they're always all nefarious. It just means that they're not actually reality. This is usually the first stage. Usually you become aware of things around you externally that you can see through, that you become awakened to. And a lot of times people reach this ability and they automatically think, oh my goodness, I'm awakened. No, you're just scratching the surface. If we go a little deeper, we go into our own mental delusions. And this is the lack of reality that is created within our own mind. And this is why a lot of the spiritual practices take us beyond the mind. We have to stop thinking. We have to stop being fooled by the delusions that the mind creates for us, and which later become beliefs that get projected upon the world and shape our view of what reality is and the life experience that we're having. So the delusions are the things that we convince ourselves to believe. And we know that the ego fills us with all kinds of silly things that we end up believing to be true. But the mind itself is very good at creating all of these beliefs, and many of these beliefs are designed to help protect our identity, which was created by the ego. So this is what is meant by a delusion. So a major part of awakening is that we are able to see these things as delusions, not real, and separate from ourselves, understanding that these delusions are not us. They're not even our thoughts. They're not our beliefs, and none of it is serving the real us. So through this aspect of awakening, we understand that once we go through the practices and meditation and such, that what happens is we come to know the truth about ourselves, and in so doing, we can see through the falseness of the external as well as our internal world. Once we no longer fall victim to our own delusions, we are able to see things for the way they truly are. So, if we look at this, when we are asleep, we are believing all of the delusions. We're not even aware that they are delusions. We think they're our normal thoughts. But all of these delusions and beliefs that our mind is creating constantly for us, and all of the things going on, all of the marketing and all of the hype and all of the things going on in the external world around us, we buy into it. We believe it's all real. We believe everything is honest and that it's actual reality. But when we awaken, we see through all of that, and we become capable of seeing things the way they really are. The second aspect of awakening is to escape or transcend the mind, and in so doing, the ego. You see, when people walk through life believing all of the constant thoughts going on in their head, and believing that it's normal to have all of those thoughts, that they believe those are their thoughts, that that is them, they are essentially sleepwalking. They're not having conscious thoughts. Most of these thoughts, the vast majority of these thoughts, are just the mind on autopilot, repeating the same old patterns again and again and again. And because of this, they are trapped in a false sense of self. And this keeps them disconnected from their true self. So when we are asleep, we believe that our ego and our mind is us. That is who we are because of the thoughts, because of the emotions. But these things are not us. As we awaken, we no longer live in a state of resistance or within a tiny comfort zone bubble or spending our lives defending our fragile identity, because we understand that none of those things are truly us. They are all just fabrications of the mind. So when we begin awakening, we are no longer lulled into an unconscious sleep state by our own thoughts. It's those thoughts that are actually a sleep state. It's like a dream because they're not our own thoughts. We confuse the thoughts running around in our head as our own and as us, but this is simply not true. Most of the thoughts are driven by the ego, and others are driven by simply the subconscious mind. All the beliefs and ideas we hold are stored in the subconscious mind. And any time we have interaction with any stimuli at all, it is constantly triggering the subconscious mind to bring up the thoughts and feelings that we have towards these things that we're experiencing. But none of that is really us. That's part of being asleep. So as we awaken, we actually awaken, realize who and what we truly are. No longer fooled by the things we normally identify ourselves with when we're dreaming. When we awaken, we transcend the mind. We go beyond the mind, and we reconnect to our pure, true consciousness, our conscious awareness, our true self. And we are capable of doing that while still inhabiting this body and mind. And that leads us to the third. When we are asleep, we identify as our body, as our mind, and as the identity that our mind has created for us. We believe that those things are us. We believe that the body we have is us, the face that we see in the mirror is us, that our mind, all these things that we're thinking all the time are us. We believe that this identity, our family name, our genetics, our heritage, the things we like and dislike, all of the ways that we have created our identity and which we believe to be us. We believe when we are asleep that that's us, that that's who we are and what we're about. When we awaken, we realize that we are not our body, that this body has nothing to do with the real me. We are not our mind. The mind has nothing to do with the real me. The real me is something separate. It is that conscious awareness. We learn to leave behind an identity because we can see that it's just a fabrication of the mind anyway. And we have been fooled into believing for so long that that is really us. That's who we are, when this is not the case. And coming to the realization that we are not our mind and not our body, and being able to hold an awareness for that every moment of every day is very, very challenging. It's one thing to say, oh, yeah, I get it. Oh, I understand that. It's another to know it so deeply inside yourself that you just can no longer really identify with the mind, body, or the identity itself any longer. And this is generally where we come to realize that the body and mind have a shelf life. They are only going to exist for so long. What happens to your identity when your body dies? It dies with you, right? What happens to your identity when your mind dies? It dies along with it. What happens to your mind when your body dies? Yep, it's gone. See, all of these things are just illusory. They are not really us. They're something we're using to experience this life, but they are not truly us. The real us, the true us, the conscious awareness, the energy that is us, does not die. It does not perish with the mind, body, and identity. Instead, it is set free. And it's commonly said that once your body and mind perish, that we truly wake up from this dream. And that leads us into the fourth. This is a realization that life is basically just a dream, and that we become intimately aware of that fact as we awaken. Life, reality, as we perceive it, is primarily just a mental projection. This is why it's referred to as an illusion, or a dream, or a movie. This aspect of awakening can be rather challenging for people to attain, let alone to accept. But if we understand how we are creating the world through a mental projection, and then we are experiencing it as such, we come to understand the truth of this, as well as the fact that it is not really us that is experiencing it, because this projection that the mind and body are creating and experiencing is not really us. The real us is not in the body or mind which is doing the experiencing. But the real us, our conscious awareness, when reconnected to, is what's doing the observing, the witnessing, the awareness for what the truth really is. So if we start to put all of that together, it will give you a better, more clear picture for what awakening is about. And of course, there's so many other facets, but these things give you the idea. And the only way you can really understand these is not from listening to this podcast, but from engaging the practices that will allow you to attain the insights, the wisdom, to know for yourself from your own direct experience with the practices that these things are true. And it is living in this state of knowing through experiencing the truth. And then we're no longer living in a state of resistance. We embrace a state of acceptance. One of the reasons it's so easy to do that is because we know nothing that we experience mentally or physically is actually having an effect on our conscious awareness. When we cut our finger, it affects the physical body, but it does not affect our conscious awareness. When someone calls us a mean, derogatory name, it may hurt our feelings, but that's just all in the mind. That has nothing to do with who and what we truly are. It doesn't affect our conscious awareness. Hopefully now you have a little bit better idea of what it is to be asleep, what is meant by being asleep or sleepwalking, and what it is to be awakened. I would like to conclude this episode by covering something that must be addressed as a word of caution. We must be careful of people who claim to be awake or awakened. We must be cautious of those who tell us that they know the exact moment they were awakened and exactly what they were doing when they were awakened, because this is generally not the case. Awakening is for the vast majority of people, if not all people, a process. We have minor and major awakenings, and we awaken a little bit more and a little bit more. It's just like in the morning when your eyes open a little bit wider as they adjust to the light, and finally you open your eyes fully. It's the same when we're awakening. Okay? As we awaken, our eyes open just a little bit to adjust to the truth, and then a little bit more truth. And then finally we can awaken to the complete truth. And it is through awakening through the practices that allow us to do that. Today it's very common for New Age folks to claim that, if you just think this and you do that you'll be awakened. That is not what is meant by awakening. So just be cautious of this so you are not fooled. Many people confuse being aware of something as being awakened. This is not the same. Just as they confuse being attentive or placing their attention on something for mindfulness, that is not the same thing. Consider this. If all we have to do is think of being aware and try to be aware in order to be awakened, wouldn't there be a lot more awakened people? But awakening requires us to transcend the mind. And while we are thinking about being aware and asking ourselves if we're aware, trying to make sure we remain aware, we are engaging the mind. You cannot transcend the mind. You cannot be in a place of essence when you are still actively working with the ego and the mind. Now, I'm not saying that reminding yourself to be aware all the time is a bad thing. It certainly isn't. It's a good practice. It does not make you awakened. Okay? Now, I know all of the listeners here are intelligent enough to realize this, but I like to put it out there just in case someone is new and they're just getting started and they don't know the difference. Just remember, there are formal practices in place that allow us to attain mindfulness, to engage meditative practices, and engage in meditation. These things have been proven to work. So look to those instead of opting instead for some simplistic New Age process shortcut, because they do not work. Most of the time, they actually just cause a strengthening of the ego and cause you to believe that you are spiritually awakened when you are not. So that, in turn, would just put you into a deeper sleep. It is more important now than ever before that we awaken. We need to awaken ourselves before we can ever help anyone else awaken. And we need to then help as many people as we can to be able to awaken, to reconnect to our true self, our conscious awareness, to reconnect to who and what we truly are while we're in this body and mind. This is the purpose of life. This is what we're here to do. Reflect on that for a moment and think about how many people, or should I say how few people, can actually do this. Yet it is available to all of us, for all of us. All of us can do it. But how many people will truly make the effort? How many people are so comfortable in their sleep, in their dream, that they just don't want to wake up? But it is when we awaken that we finally become capable of experiencing real love, real happiness, and real appreciation. It is truly a gift that we have available to us if we are willing to wake up. Please make sure to visit me at www.expansionmastery.com. Grab your autographed copy of Expansion Mastery there, as well as my newly revised and expanded ebook and some other goodies. Check out the blog and things that are there. And please make sure to help us on social media, share and do all of the likes and subscribes and all of that stuff that goes with it. That always helps us out immensely, and it is greatly, greatly appreciated. Till next time, my friends, I wish you the very best in your practices, in your awakening, and your life. Take care.